Okay, right, now then. Last week I did ask for requests for videos, and excuse my tatty shirt and my creaky chair, but yes, last week I did ask for suggestions or requests for topics for videos, and we had one or two, and one thing that cropped up was raw therapy. Now, oh dear, let me just say from the outset, I do not in any way, shape or form class myself as anything of an expert or somebody with a broad knowledge base of raw therapy. I do not. Raw therapy is a very complex program, and I did see a video last week on another channel where the responses to it was one of these videos that was how can I put it, looking at alternatives to Adobe, and somebody put a comment on one of these videos where raw therapy was mentioned, that raw therapy can't possibly be any good because you don't pay for it. It's free, you get what you pay for. That person is a total bloody idiot. Alright? A total know-nothing, knuckle-dragging, primitive idiot. He's got less brains than a bloody amoeba. Raw Therapee is an extremely hostile-looking program, and we've got a new version of it, 5.6, and it runs like a broken steam locomotive on my computer. It is very slow and very clunky. Why that is, I do not know. But Raw Therapee is awesome. And really and truly, it puts Lightroom in the shade for doing what raw processing software is supposed to do. In other words, process your raw files. I don't use Raw Therapee as much as I should, because I find that Lightroom, for the most part, does a good enough job. And I say good enough in inverted commas. It is just about good enough. And it pisses me off no end that we have to pay for it when Raw Therapee is so damn good. If you download RawTherapee 5.6, you will come up with little problems when you go to output your files, and I did do another video on YouTube on outputting from Raw Therapee to Photoshop quite some time ago, and I'll put a link to it up there or down there or wherever, and it will be on the end screen as well, so go and have a look at that. But what I recommend everybody does is go on the internet and jump over to Chromasoft. And if you go to Chromasoft and you go to this URL here, you will get ICM profiles, and you can actually go and download this ICM profiles.zip. And what that folder, that zip file, will give you is Melissa RGB, ProPhoto RGB, and Adobe RGB 1998. Now, if you extract those profiles and put them in your default profiles folder on your system and then restart Raw Therapee will actually pick those profiles up, so you can export from Raw Therapee direct to Photoshop in the ProPhoto RGB colour space. I will show you that a little bit later on. However, to get back to Raw Therapee, we're looking at these this exposure bracketed sequence here, and really and truly, I was in a hurry. I got there far too late, and we got all this nice fog over these sessile oaks in the top of Padley Gorge, and straight away you can see the sun's a little bit on the high side and it's starting to burn out, so it's starting to burn the fog away. So I was just shot a bracketed sequence as fast as I could. But I actually knew that I wanted a final image that was going to be in the 6:17 aspect ratio, super wide panorama. So I managed to get away with it. So what I'm going to do is do a sympathetic process to this image. Then I'm going to show you how to apply that same process to the other images in the exposure stack that I want to use, and then we'll take them into Photoshop. And yeah, so I think we better get on now, because 6 minutes, God almighty, and people complain that I ramble. Yeah, they do. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to crop the image, and I need to come to the crop tab, which is this with the scissors on it, and we're going to activate the crop, and I want to come to this checkbox here, and I want to apply a 6:17 crop to it, and there we go. However, it's in the wrong place. So if I unlock or untick this lock ratio box, I can now drag the bottom edge of the crop down to roughly where I want it, and I can drag the top of the frame down to just about where I want it, and then I can go lock ratio again, and that will just about do us for the time being, for the purposes of this demonstration. So now I've got the crop on, I'm going to come over to the demosaicing tab. I'm going to leave it in the Amaze demosaicing method. Anybody who's got my sharpening training tutorials will know all about RawTherapee Amaze and Amaze plus VNG Thor, etc. And usually I put this in the Amaze plus VNG Thor demosaicing system. So fundamentally it gets demosaic twice, but for the sake of expediency I'm going to leave it just in Amaze. So I'm then going to come to chromatic aberration correction, and I'm going to apply auto chromatic aberration correction, which is usually what you do in Lightroom. This is where RawTherapee wins out over Lightroom, because of the demosaicing algorithms that it uses. I mean, you've got loads of them there, just look at it. And the whoops-a-daisy, put that back in Amaze. The actual demosaicing algorithm in Lightroom is the one thing I have a massive problem with. It is not very good at all. It will just about do. Yes. If I now come to the exposure tab, and you can see I've got a little bit of a bright highlight over here, which is to be expected. So I'm going to ask it to reconstruct the highlights. I'm going to switch out to colour propagation as a method for reconstructing the highlight, and we're just going to add a little bit of highlight compression until that looks pretty much alright. I'm going to come down to this other tab here called dynamic range compression, and we're going to activate it. When it will decide to activate, there we go. And now you can see the image. You think the image has gone flat. It hasn't, not really, because don't forget it was shot in fog. The fog was burning off at a rapid rate of knots, but shot in fog it was nonetheless. But it has gone a little bit flat. So we have also under the exposure tab tone curve, but you'll notice we've got tone curve 1 and tone curve 2. Yes, so I'm going to elect for a standard tone curve like that, and you can see we've just got a subtle S-shaped curve going on in there, and that's fundamentally just put a little bit more contrast in there. Now then, I'm going to go to tone curve 2, because yes, we can apply 2 tone curves to the image, and I'm going to choose from here flexible. And now look at the amount of contrast I've got in the image. Yes, and your flexible tone curve might not look like this. Yours might look in a straight line, and all I'm doing is I'm just adding a little bit of lift to the mid-tones. I brought the highlights down just a little bit, that's where they are by default. Just going to drag them down a little bit. I'm lifting the upper mid-tones, I'm dropping the lower mid-tones, and I'm leaving the black point where it is. So again we get this subtle S-shaped curve, but it's got a little bit more lift in the mid-tones, and it's pulled the white point down. So I'm quite liking the look of this at the moment. We're going to come down to the bottom and we'll just have a little tiny play with this dynamic range compression just to see if it does make any difference from its default setting. Let's just turn the amount up to sort of 21, 22. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the anchor point. Now you'll see the anchor point, there's our black point, there's our white point. The anchor point at the minute is set at 50 on a scale of 1 to 100. So it's anchoring this dynamic range compression on the mid-tones, if you like. I want it to anchor it towards the actual highlights. And so if I can just get it to change sliders, I'm just going to move it a little bit, and you can see what we're doing now is we're actually brightening the image, and I'll leave it at around 76. Now I'm going to come to the colour tab when it will decide to change. There we go. And do I want it to look a little bit more yellow, a little bit warmer? Yes, I think I do. So I might just warm the colour temperature up just a little tiny bit. That looks pretty much okay. So I'm now going to come to the Details tab, and first of all I'm going to come all the way down to the bottom of the Details tab, and I just want to select defringe, right, and I'm going to leave it at its default setting. I'm then going to come up a little bit and I'm going to activate noise reduction. Now you'll see previous videos of mine on Raw Therapee, and those of you who've got my sharpening training will have seen me change the colour space for noise reduction from lab to RGB. I'm actually going to leave it in lab on this one because there isn't a lot of noise. It's not a high ISO image, not in any way, shape or form. It was shot on the D800E with 2470 at 2.8, and yeah, there's no noise in the image, none to speak of. Though when you look at it at 100%, which we will do in a minute, you might see it look a little bit funny, and you'll think it has got a bit of noise in it. No, it hasn't. That's the fog. Yeah. But the one reason I want to activate this noise reduction is so it turns on the chrominance, and the chrominance setting by default is at automatic global. And I've hovered over there because you've got three choices: manual, automatic global, or preview. You could put it on manual, but automatic global, you can see it says acts on the full image. 9 zones are used to calculate a global chrominance noise reduction setting. And really and truly, that's the same sort of thing that you get in Lightroom. So if it's good enough for Lightroom, yes. I'm usually happy with it in Lightroom, and I'm very happy with it, take it from me, inside of Raw Therapee. So I'm going to leave that set exactly as it is. I'm not going to touch anything else, and we're going to come all the way to the top now, and we are going to go in on a 1:1 magnification. Now this is where it starts to go a little bit slow on my machine because we're demosaicing it and all sorts, and it's got to re-render a preview. This is where Lightroom wins over on Raw Therapee because it generates its own previews on the fly, whereas Raw Therapee has to just reprocess everything whenever you change the magnification, or indeed whenever you move across the image. So I'm just going to come to there and we'll just let it process out again, rather like that, and you can see it's got no sharpening on it. The first thing I want to do is turn on micro contrast, and micro contrast, it is a sharpening method, and I'm just going to activate it in a 3x3 matrix instead of the 5x5. That just makes it work just that little bit tighter, and it makes a subtle difference to the level of sharpening because what it's doing, it's looking for the contrast between the microscopic details in the image. So it's working fundamentally right down at a pixel level. I'm also going to turn on local contrast, and now you can see that makes quite a big difference. It's a little bit too much for me because it's trying to differentiate between highlights or mid-tone highlights, mid-tones and mid-tone shadows, if you sort of get me drift. And it's just trying to look for different intertonal contrast details and emphasize them. So I'm usually wanting to back that off just a little bit. Now then, we come to the important bit. Sharpening, yes. And this is where RawTherapee just kicks 7 bells of you-know-what out of Lightroom. It seriously does. We're going to come to the sharpening tab and we're going to turn it on. And now look at that. Now that is default unsharp mask sharpening. We can change the unsharp mask for full-blown RL deconvolution. That's Richardson Lucy deconvolution sharpening, and that will take the image sharpness through the roof. And it's defaulting at 30 iterations. We can actually turn that all the way up to 100 iterations should we so desire. The way the sharpening algorithm works, it's iteration based. So what that means is it works once and then it comes along for its second iteration, but it doesn't use the lack of sharpness in the original image to calculate again. What it does, it looks at how sharp it is after iteration number 1 and then goes and builds it up a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. 100 times, yes, and it's just crazy sharp. Absolutely crazy sharp. You could turn the damping up, which then sort of calms it down in an efficient way, but it doesn't remove it. It sort of tones down parts of the algorithm, or the iterative algorithm. And RL deconvolution sharpening is incredibly useful, but this image is plenty sharp enough, really, and so RL deconvolution on this is overkill. So we are going to switch back to unsharp mask. Oh, thank God for that. Yeah, whew, that looks a bit better. Now then, with unsharp mask, I can take the amount up just a little bit, and now it's looking just ever so slightly sharper. I can also dictate the blur radius because at the end of the day, we're adding sharpening to get rid of blur. So we can sort of dictate how big the blur radius is. And if we just move it up from 0.2 to 0.32, you can see that the sharpening, well, maybe you can, I hope you can with video compression, the sharpening has gone up just a little bit more. But the thing about unsharp mask sharpening is it's renowned for creating halos. So the first thing we can do to combat halos is the really high contrast boundary halos, which are between nearly black and nearly white. In other words, our darkest shadows and our brightest highlights. So we can just take these threshold sliders and we can just move the bottom left hand slider just away from the black point. So now it means it's only sharpening tones that are 54 RGB or lighter, but that's not 54 RGB as you might understand it, because this runs on a scale of 0 to 2000. But anyway, we've taken the sharpening off the deepest shadows. We're now going to remove the sharpening off the brightest highlights, but then what we can do is hold down the shift key, I think it is, and we can sort of vary the steepness of the ramp. So fundamentally we've got no sharpening applied up to this level of brightness, and then sharpening is gradually applied up to this level of brightness. It's fully applied to this level of brightness, which is 1520 on a scale of 0 to 2000, and then it starts to trail off down to a value of 1910. So the highlights are not getting sharpened. The last thing we can do to control halos is activate halo control. Yes, don't get this in bloody Lightroom either. So by default it comes in at 85. I'm just sort of going to turn it down to around about the mid-30s. And there we go. Now for me, this image, if we come out to a fit to screen view, that image is processed. Now then, I just need to come down to the bottom of the colour menu or colour tab, because here's where those ICM profiles come in handy, because we need to be able to export this image in the ProPhoto RGB colour space. So we usually have by default these RT colour spaces, and then you'll have your monitor profiles, etc., which you must never use for colour management ever. They apply to your monitor and nothing else. Because we've downloaded that ICM.zip, we've opened it up and we've moved the profiles, the ProPhoto and the Melissa RGB profiles, over to our default profiles folder. RawTherapee can now see them. But when you move those profiles into your main profiles folder, if you've got RawTherapee running, you actually need to close RawTherapee and then restart it, otherwise it won't see the profiles. So we can select to output to Photoshop in the ProPhoto RGB colour space. So what we are now going to do, because don't forget, this shot is part of an exposure bracket. So we are going to come to this little icon here, which looks like a, like some sort of SIM card, because it's got the corner cut off and a little down arrow. And we can now save everything that we've done to this image as a processing profile. So I will just call this Sessile Oaks, and we will click Save. Right, now then, if I come to the Preferences panel, what you need to do to get it to open Photoshop when you export is to put this command line in there, and you'll see the command line in the comments below, or the description below, so you can fundamentally just copy it and paste it into this command line instruction in the Preferences panel. And so we'll just click OK on there, and what I can now do is export this image to Photoshop just by clicking on this little icon here, which looks sort of like a paintbrush and an artist's palette. And you can see up at the top here, the image is actually processing, and now it's ready. So what it will do is in a moment, it'll open up Photoshop. Here we go. And there's our image opening Photoshop. So what I'm now going to do is come back to RawTherapee, and I'm going to go back to the file browser, and I'm going to come to this shot here, which is One Stop Darker. So we double click to get it to open up in the editor, and then we can apply our profile by coming to this folder here on the right, load a profile from file. So we can click that folder, and we need to look for sessileoaks.pp3, and we'll just go open. And there we go. So now we've applied exactly the same processing profile to this shot, which is One Stop Darker. It's still going to output as ProPhoto, so we're now going to click this icon here again. Admittedly, we could have processed both images and put them in the processing queue, but then that's sort of saving them, and I just want to go straight into the editor. And there we go. So we might want to load these two files into a stack. Now, yes, we can just drag and drop them with the Shift key held down to centralize them, or we can go to File, Scripts, Load Files into Stack, Add Open Files. Don't bother attempting to automatically align source images, because that doesn't need to work, because these will align centrally, and I could now, if I wanted to, go and hold down the Alt key and put a black mask over our lighter frame, and then I could just simply, with a white brush enabled, sort of at middle opacity, I could sort of go in there and start to, if you like, dodge, but I'm not dodging. I'm just sort of bringing in lighter areas from our initially processed frame. And you can see how you can start to build up the contrast. We could then come in here and allow some of the lighter shadows to shine through. We could do it that way, we could do it with a luminosity mask, and of course we could do a dodge layer over the top. Let's go for soft light in the soft light, put it in the soft light blend mode. Let's go and pull up a lights one mask. Let's just go and make that a bit brighter, and we'll just come and quickly lay that on there, and we'll mask that layer, and then we'll come in with a paintbrush again, painting with this colour, a little bit of a sort of a pale yellowy green, and we can just start to build up a sort of a colour tint over some of these highlights. I mean, this is looking absolutely rubbish because I'm sort of doing it in a hurry, just as a sort of a quick demonstration, but it sort of gives you an idea of the sort of thing you can do in Photoshop, which is fundamentally the subject of this bloody training title that I'm still trying to get finished on dodging and burning. But just remember this, if we go into this image at 100%, look how sharp and detailed it is. Yes, there's a lot of retouching needs doing on it because everything was wringing wet through because of the hill fog that had been present throughout the morning, so there's lots and lots of glinty specular highlights, but retouching's retouching. Tedious, boring, but really, really simple. But overall, you can begin to see how we can build up the mood and drama and atmosphere in this image. And we've got there fundamentally through RawTherapee. And one thing, RawTherapee does have a tendency, if you look down here at the bottom, at our info panel, it does have a tendency on this machine. I don't know if it's the same on everybody else's, and I don't know if it's the same on Windows, but it sort of exports into Photoshop at 72 dots per inch, or pixels per inch I should say. It doesn't really matter, but if you want to put your image back in 300 pixels per inch, it's really, really simple. Just make sure you haven't got a particular layer selected, and just then come to image size. Do not put a checkbox in resample, leave that empty, and where it says 72 just type 300 and Bob's your uncle. And now the image is exactly the same size in pixels, and it is at 300 pixels per inch. So there you go. Yes, RawTherapee. It is not nasty, it is not cheap, and it is in no way, shape or form inferior in any way to Adobe Lightroom. The only thing is, the digital asset management side of Adobe Lightroom means it is winner chicken dinner time. Yes, and seen as far as I'm concerned, it does a relatively good job for the majority of times that I use it. Lightroom will always be something that I will pay for, and quite happily so as well, because it is a fantastic bit of software. But seriously, for demosaic in RAW files, RawTherapee kicks Lightroom's ass. Yeah, now I've said that, let's see how many thumbs down this video gets, and yeah, let's see how many views it gets. Yes. Sorry it's been a long video. According to my timer here, it's 36 minutes long. I will have to edit a little bit out, but it's a long video, so there you go. Okay guys, that's RawTherapee for you, and hope you enjoyed that video, hope you got something useful out of it. Don't forget, if you like the video, go click the subscribe button, click the ringety-tingety bell to get a notification the next time I put a video up, and I'll try not to make it quite so long next time. Okay, see you soon guys. Cheerio.